Today is November 11th, 2014. I'm the interviewer, Dave Sullivan. This morning I'm speaking with Tony, I'm pronouncing Boeckholt, don't I?
Boeckholt.
Boeckholt,
Yeah.
okay, thank you. His birth date is
3/3/32.
3/3/32, okay. He is a veteran of the United States Army and was in service from 1952 to 1954, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And the beginning of the time of the interview today is about 10:10. Okay, if I call you Tony?
Fine.
Okay, Tony, let's just take a brief history. Now, you were born in Iowa, weren't you?
Yes, Titanca,
Okay.
Iowa.
Okay, kind of a farm boy, were you?
True.
Okay. Went to school out there?
I went to a one-room country schoolhouse. I used to ride a horse to school.
Those are the days, right? Weren't they? And did you go to high school out there too?
Yes, I did.
And when you graduated from high school, what did you do?
When I graduated from high school, I had several jobs. The main thing was working for my father on the farm,
Okay.
on the family farm, yeah.
What made you decide to join the Army?
I didn't decide to join the Army. My friends and neighbors selected me.
Okay. You mean you got a letter in the mail that said, we would like you to serve in the Army, is that right?
We want you to represent our country.
Okay. Where did you do your basic training?
I did my basic training in Camp Chaffee, Arkansas.
Okay. And what was your specialty in those days? What were they training you for?
They trained us for infantry and artillery. 8 weeks of infantry, 8 weeks of artillery.
Okay. Then when you graduated, you were sent someplace?
When we were graduated, of course, we went home on leave, and then we boarded a troop train in Kansas City, Missouri, and went to Fort Lewis, Washington, where we boarded the ship to go to Korea.
I think, if I recall properly, that was the longest trip leaving Fort Lewis, Washington to get to the ocean. I thought we'd probably cross the country. I couldn't believe how long that was.
Well, it took you a little longer than it did us. It took us, I think, 14 days. You said 17.
Oh, but I mean just going from Fort Lewis all the way down to get to the ocean.
Oh, yeah,
It was some of the longest trips I've ever seen. Okay, so now you're on the ship. What was it? Which one was it? One of the MiGs, U.S. MiGs and things like that?
It was a troop ship that held about 3,500 guys.
Okay.
I can't remember the name, but I think it was the General Housey.
Yeah, they were all part of that
Yeah.
General MiGs, the whole General series, yeah, okay. So you spent 14 glorious days going across the ocean, right?
Yeah, I thought it would be neat to volunteer to do something to pass the time, so I volunteered to work in the galley, I think it's the galley.
Yes.
And I don't know whether that was a mistake, because I smoked cigarettes pretty heavily, and the galley was hot, and you sweat everything out.
Did you have any bad weather going over?
Yes, we did have bad weather going over. We entered I think they call it a typhoon,
Oh,
and we were below deck for 2 days. And I remember coming above deck, and it's the first time I ever saw a flying fish was laying on the deck,
now that during a typhoon, it must have been a good time, wasn't been a good time to be in the galley, was it? I shouldn't have too many people show up to eat
Yeah,
in those
it
days,
wasn't
did it?
too good.
I know a lot of people kind of got a little ill during those
Yeah,
kind of weather,
right,
so
yeah.
especially when you're below deck. Now, where did you land in Korea? Busan, did you say?
I landed at Busan, yeah.
Okay. Did you know at that time you were going to be in the artillery, or you still weren't sure?
I wasn't sure.
So you could have been the infantry, you could have been the
Yes,
artillery. Okay.
either way.
And when you got to Busan, then you went to headquarters and got your orders.
When we got to Busan, we got off of the ship, and it was a pretty dingy place. And they called our names, and nobody could pronounce my last name, so they always called out your serial number, that you answer to your
That's
serial
right.
number. Then we got on a Korean train. It was all wooden cars with a steam engine, and all the windows were blown out. And they put a guard in the front and a guard in the back. They only gave us one clip of ammo each one. And the train was full of guys. I mean, it was loaded with guys. And we headed for Seoul, from Busan to Seoul. But of course, inside the train was very dirty. The windows were so dark you could hardly see out of them, and a lot of them were shattered. And I remember going through tunnels, and the whole car would fill up with smoke from the engine because it was a steam engine, and you just about choked, you know.
Before we go any further, I do want to present you though with this medal today, which is from the people here that celebrate your service. We want to do thank you so very much for your service, because we know it was a sacrifice, so we want this as a remembrance of today. So now we'll get you on the train, right? We got to get you off the train sometime, okay? Where did the train end up?
The train ended up in Seoul, and I remember seeing the buildings. Everything was a mess, you know, everything was blown up. And we got off the train in Seoul and got on army trucks, and they took us back east to a replacement depot called Chuncheon, and that's where they assigned us to the outfits that we were going to. We still didn't know whether we were going to be infantry or artillery.
When did they tell you you're going to be the artillery?
Just before boarding the truck to go to our unit.
So that deuce and a half is going to be this, that deuce and a half is going to be that, right? So
yeah.
you boarded the artillery one, right?
And that was at night when we boarded trucks, because they never traveled in the day, so the enemy couldn't see who you were or where you were. And they had cat eyes, you know, when they traveled at night.
Then where did the deuce and a half take you?
The deuce and a half took us to a place called the Punch Bowl.
Yes.
And there was the triple nickel field artillery. I can remember when we went to the Punch Bowl, we had to go through a valley. It was called Smoky Valley, and it was full of 155s. And then we went on to the Punch Bowl, and we were replacements because the triple nickel had been wiped out in a place called Mundung Ni. And so I was a replacement for some of the guys that were probably captured or killed or whatever. So,
What was your duties with the 105s?
well, you sort of started out like an intern, and you prepared shells for the gun, so you knew how all of that worked, because in a 155 the shell comes in two separate pieces. The projectile is in one crate and the shell casing is in the other crate with 7 charges in it. So you had to learn how to assemble the projectile into the casing, and so you just sort of went up the ladder until you knew how to run it, to do everything.
Okay.
And it took about maybe 2 weeks to, but we were trained in Camp Chaffee how to do a lot of this stuff, so it was pretty easy.
Okay, so you were, how many, were there 6 batteries in the company?
6 guns in a battery.
6 guns in a battery, okay, and you had a chief of firing battery?
Pardon me?
You had a chief of firing battery then?
Yeah, we had a chief of firing battery, and we had an exec officer, then we had a first sergeant, and then of course you had chief of sections for each gun.
Right.
Yeah.
Did you live in a tent in those days?
Yes.
Okay, and each
Well, we
section?
lived in whatever, we moved to a lot of positions. In some positions we went into bunkers in the side of a mountain that was maybe occupied at one point by Chinese or by Turks or by Greeks or whatever. And sometimes we had tents.
How did you move your guns around, Tony?
We pulled them with the deuce and a half.
Hook them up in the back?
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay. So they were pretty mobile in those days then, weren't they? Yeah.
Well, I think the 105s were probably quick to move around, and that's like the triple nickel. They were kind of a bastard outfit, you know. Wherever they needed to plug a hole, well, that's where they sent us. So we were on the move a lot.
Now you were in Korea almost 2 years, weren't you?
Yeah.
From about what, 52 to 54?
52 to 54, yeah.
Was the tour of duty in those days 16 months, or was it 2 years? Did you
2
serve
years.
2 years, okay.
Yeah. Some guys got out in 20 months.
Because I know then they cut it down after that to 16 months, so.
Yeah, but
Depends.
I was in for 24.
Right. Okay, so you must have seen a lot of action over there then, did you?
Yeah, I was there from the beginning was action until the truce was signed, in, I think, July 27th.
Okay,
The truce was signed. I got there February 15th, I think.
okay.
So I think I was on the line maybe 5 months.
Now, did you move around a lot in those days? You said they took you from one place to the other, to the other, to the other, I guess.
We did. We were at the Punch Bowl first, and we were supporting the 5th Regimental Combat Team, which we belonged to. And then they took us from the Punch Bowl and they moved us to the Chorwan Valley. It was called the Iron Triangle. There was a town of Chorwan, there was a town of Kumwan, there was a town of Pyongyang. That wasn't the North Korean capital. It sounds like
Yeah,
it, but
no.
it wasn't. And the Chorwan Valley came down through, and it was a valley. And they sent us to support the 5th Regimental Combat Team. Was assigned the job to secure Outpost Harry. An able company of the 5th RCT was the one that was supposed to support Outpost Harry, which was probably as big as a football field, and was a very strategic post because the Chinese, it was getting towards the end of the war when the truce was signed, and the Chinese wanted to get all these positions and push the line back to the 38th parallel because this was sort of north of the 38th parallel. So we parked below Outpost Harry so we could shoot projectiles onto Outpost Harry, and there was a first lieutenant that was in command of able company of the 5th Regimental Combat Team, and our forward observer from able battery of the Triple Nickel was the forward observer for able company. And in order to get up to the able company, you had to walk a trail. You couldn't drive up there. It was all mountain, and it was a steep climb. And you got up to the trenches. It's strange because we were fighting a trench war, just like in the First World War. We weren't allowed to invade the enemy, but all we were allowed to do was to hold the territory we had. So they had all trenches up through the mountain ridges, and that's where they fought, from trenches. And our trenches were different from World War I trenches because our trenches were probably 3 feet wide at the top, and they kind of came down to 2 feet wide at the bottom, and however they could dig them out of the mountains. And I only had to go up there once to the trenches because during basic training you're trained as a field wireman also.
Oh.
And we had a colored guy that was the field wireman, and he was a real character, and he was really fun to be with. So he came in and said, we need a couple volunteers to go up. I got to do some field wiring for the infantry. And I thought, well, this would be nice, I'll go along. So I volunteered. So I had to follow him up there, and that was quite an experience, because when we went up to those trenches, I can remember going past, there was a dead soldier laying there, and a tank had run over it. I mean, it was just laying there in the path, and the tanks and the vehicles were running over the top of him.
Was he an American soldier? Or?
I think it was an American soldier. I don't know for sure. And so, but anyhow, we had to walk past him, and that was a real eye-opener for me. And then we had to go all the way up to the command post. They call it the CP, I guess. And that trench was kind of a big turnabout. And the CP was like here, And then way up here was the forward observers post. And the forward observer was from our battery. And we had to go to his post, and he wanted us to run a wire all the way across here to a clump of trees up in the mountains. Some comma wire, they call it comma wire. So they said, well, here's a roll of wire, and they run a stick through the, the roll. One guy get on each side and run to beat hell. Don't stop and look or anything. Run to beat hell over there, because the enemy can see, and if you stop, well, they might shoot you. So, oh my God. I should have never volunteered for this. So we ran like hell up to this bush, and then we stayed there for a little while, and then we ran back, and then of course everything was fine. Nobody shot at us. And then we circled around, we came back down, and we went back to our battery. And other than that, my memory kind of escapes me.
So how long are you online there like that?
5 months.
5 months?
Yeah.
Okay. Then did you pull back at all?
We pulled back a couple times, so they would take us to shower points and delouse us. And the shower points were big tripods, and they had a barrel hanging on it, and they had a pumper truck pumping water into the barrels, and they had holes in the bottom of the barrels, and everybody got naked and in a line, and we just walked through and under this shower thing, and we came out the other end. They threw us a towel, and then we walked past a bunch of guys were throwing clothes at us. Didn't know whether they fit or not, so we had to swap and trade with each other to find a pair of pants that fit or a shirt that fit or whatever.
Did you spend a couple of winters in Korea?
One winter, when I first got there, was February, and I went to the Punch Bowl, and I think the second night we was there, it snowed 16 inches, and it was cold. And of course, we were living in bunkers in the side of the hill then. But we had a tent set up by the 105 where, when we went out there and manned the 105, we could go in this tent, and we sat around a little charcoal stove. And
so you knew why they call it the Frozen Chosen then, right?
oh yeah, yeah. And I remember when I first got there to the Punch Bowl, that night they captured 5 Chinese soldiers, and we'd go to a tent to have breakfast in the morning. And I remember going to breakfast, and they said, well, there's 5 Chinese captives, and they're going through the chow line. Had guards, and these 5 Chinese were going through the chow line, and they were just piling food on, and they sat down and they just ate like crazy. And afterwards, they all got sick because
Hadn't eaten in so long.
No.
Yeah.
They didn't seem like they were too worried about being prisoners. I think they probably were happy, maybe.
So you spent actually then 5 months online, but you kind of moved around a little bit, moved the battery from one place to another?
Yeah. Like, we went from the Punch Bowl, we went to the Chorwan Valley, and that's when we protected Outpost Harry. And after that, they left the 5th Regimental Combat Team there, but the Triple Nickel, they said, we have to go to down to the Kumwa point of the Iron Triangle, and we were supposed to back up the ROK Army, the Republic of Korea Army.
Yep.
And they called it the Kumsang River Salient. And of course, a salient is a bulge in the line, you know? That's what a salient is called. And then the Kumwa River run through there too. And on the left side of the salient was Sniper Ridge. On the right side of the salient was Christmas Hill. and there were Americans protecting the Sniper Ridge and Americans protecting Christmas Hill. But the center of the salient was supposed to be held by the ROK soldiers, the Republic of Korea soldiers, and that's who we were backing up. We were up into that horseshoe area there, and we protected the ROK soldiers there.
Did you have any Katusas in your
Yes,
outfit?
we had a percentage of Katusas in every battery.
Okay. You had a sergeant there, Katusa sergeant, who was,
Yeah,
took care of them.
Yeah, he was tough.
yeah, they were, I guess, I
Yeah.
can imagine that, because I remember I had some of those too.
But this Kumsang River salient was a 20-mile front, you might say, a 20-mile front. And the Chinese were over here, and we were over here, and there's mountains all around. And so I think we moved in there in the afternoon. We did move in there in the afternoon, and everything was fine. They called mail call, and I knew I got a package from my mother, which, you know, if you got a package, everybody wanted to know what you had.
Share it.
So, yeah, I wanted to share it. So I quick slipped it under my arm, and I dug a little hole out in front of our gun section and buried it quick, because I was going to share it with my buddies later. And there's a river running in front of our gun section. That was the Kumsang River. And it was probably as big as the river that ran through our pasture on our farm, you know. And it seemed kind of strange because as boys, you know, like Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn and everything, we lived on that river and farm a lot. And I thought, well, tomorrow, if everything's good, I'm gonna check that river out, see if there's any fish in there. But anyhow, that's where we set up our gun section. And of course, there's 6 guns in a section, or in a battery, yeah. But we had to wade through the river because we put our tent up in kind of a valley between 2 mountains there, our squad tent. And everything was nice and quiet and everything like that. We fired a few rounds because you have to set up your gun. You know, there's a sergeant with I don't know what he has, a quadrant or something, and he lines up all the barrels so they're parallel, and you have an aiming stake out here with a little light on it. The aiming stake looks like a barber pole, but it's only like 1 inch in diameter probably. And so we set all of that up, everything was fine. And the sky was overcast and stormy looking, because I think it was like that was July, probably July 12th or 10th or something like that. And that's probably the beginning of the monsoon, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, somewhere at that time. So I know we had to eat sea rations that night because the cook couldn't set up his place in time. And like we had 7 men on a gun, and then we had another crew that slept in the tent. I think maybe they were 7 men also. About 14 guys on a gun, maybe something like that. So we slept in the tent first. It was daytime. Well, then we came on and took over the gun at I don't know what it was, maybe 8 o'clock at night or something like that. But anyhow, in the middle of the night, or towards morning, all hell broke loose there, because the Chinese general turned 8 divisions loose. That's 80,000 men, because they wanted this bulge in the line, they wanted to straighten that all out. So they turned 8 divisions loose, and it was nothing but gunfire, and it was fireworks. I mean, the sky was lit up. It was unbelievable. And I don't really know how bad it was until probably 4 o'clock in the morning. It was like the hill looked like maybe a big Christmas tree. There was all kinds of lights moving all over on this hill coming down, and there were bugles blowing and whistles blowing and everything. And the Chinese had run the rock soldiers retreated and ran off the hill in all directions. And the Chinese came through in hordes. And of course, the first wave of Chinese all have weapons, and as many of them as you kill and they fall, then the second wave doesn't have weapons and they pick up the weapons from the first wave. But I don't remember too many of the particulars on that, but we were all scared as hell, there's no doubt about that. But it was raining hard and the air was full of smoke, and you could smell gunpowder and hear all kinds of noise and yelling and hollering and shooting. And I remember a colonel came around with a poncho on in the middle of the night. He came around and he says, "Boys," he says, "we're surrounded by Chinese." He says, "Every man try to save himself." And I looked at this buddy of mine and I said, "Wow, I don't know what that means." You know, this colonel, he's a lieutenant colonel, came around and said that. And so our chief of section right away, we pull the trails together on the gun, and they tried to hook up the truck to it and pull out. And the rock soldiers were coming like crazy too. They wanted to get out of there, and they piled all over our truck. And my buddy and I, we were laying in a foxhole near where the gun was, because we couldn't get on the truck. So he was kind of a father figure because he was a lot older than me. He was 27 years old, and I was only 20. So I figured, well, this guy's a lot smarter than me. I'll just do whatever he says. So he said, "See that tank over there? We're going to run and get on it," because there was a big tank coming on the scene. And I says, "Well, it looks like it's going the wrong direction for us, you know." So we ran to get on this tank, and we got on, and it was all full of rock soldiers too. And this gunner in this tank turned around and dumped us all off. So we were on foot then. And so this guy's name was Howard Hoyle, and he was from Asheville, North Carolina. So we started walking, and he says, "Don't shoot at anybody, because then you'll give your position away." But we saw guys being captured, you know. We saw 2 or 3 guys being captured, and they would tie their hands behind their back with a commo wire and disappear, and they were our soldiers. And Howard says, "We don't want to get captured because they'll take us behind the hill and kill us or shoot us." He says, "That's what they're going to do with those guys." So I thought, well, I better listen to what he's saying, you know, so I went along with him. And I don't know how many, it was probably a day later when we got with friendly forces. And
Walking all this time?
Yeah, well, we weren't walking all the time. We were kind of hiding.
Hiding and walking.
And actually, we had to cross a bridge across the Kumsong River. And he said to me, he says, "We got these damn rifles." He says, "They're a burden." He says, "We probably should just throw them away, because we're not going to shoot at anybody." And he says, "We got to get down and crawl on our hands and knees across this bridge." So we did. And somehow we came to somebody in an army jeep, and they took us to, we were attached to the 9th Corps at that time, because, you know, being a bastard outfit, you never know who he's going to be attached to next. So we were with the 9th Corps, so they took us right to the 9th Corps headquarters. And we were hungry. We didn't have anything to eat for several days, and we were dirty, and just happy that we were with some friendly people. So he says, "Well, we have to take you in the 9th Corps headquarters." So we went to the 9th Corps headquarters. There was a lieutenant colonel in there, and he dressed us down like you wouldn't believe. and called us all kinds of names. And because we were supposed to stay and fight in our position, we weren't supposed to try to get away. So I said that, sir, a lieutenant colonel came around and told us to save our life as best we could, get out of there. And he says, what was his name? And I said, well, I don't quite remember what his name was, but I think his name was Colonel McClure. And but he says, I'm going to find out that colonel's name, and he'll never be able to hold a command again. You know, so he said, well, we're going to give you some new clothes and some rifles, and we'll give you breakfast, and we're going to put you on a helicopter and fly you right back to that position, because you can't let the enemy take over. And I thought, oh my God, I'm not hungry. So I don't think he knew for sure what he was saying, because they congregated all of the guys that were from our outfit together and took an inventory of what equipment got out and what didn't. And somehow or another we got back with our outfit. And I don't think that we did any firing again after that until the truce was signed.
Did they flew you back? Did they to the front where you were before?
No, they didn't.
Oh, they didn't?
They didn't.
Okay.
No, because our outfit was in such disarray. We lost like 44 of our guys were captured, and I think 19 of them were killed, and I think something like 29 were wounded.
Did you lose all your guns too?
I think that the gun we were on, I think they saved it because they pulled out and we couldn't get on the truck. And a lot of the guns they lost. You're supposed to put a white phosphorus grenade in the breech block and close it and let it, I don't know whether they did that or not. But actually speaking, our forward observer at that point when we were in battle, he didn't get killed, but he had to get out of there too. So we were told to just shoot a charge 2 in the shell casing and lower the barrel of the gun and shoot right into the hill where the Chinese were coming across. You know, we didn't have any, our fire mission was just to fire at will.
So he wasn't sending down any coordinates or anything?
No, he wasn't sending any coordinates because he wasn't there.
Yeah.
Actually, I can't remember what his name was. I thought it was Lieutenant McKenna, but he had a Jeep driver called, his last name was Mertz. And I went over on the troop ship with Mertz. And Mertz was a little short, stocky guy, and he was nothing but mean. And I remember when I was working down in the galley, and he came through for breakfast. You know, they have one guy serving oatmeal and one guy serving scrambled eggs and whatever. And I know Mertz came through the chow line, and the guy with oatmeal gave him a splat on his plate. And Mertz says, give me some more. And the guy took a big spoonful and splat, knocked the tray out. So Mertz punched him out right there. So he ended up in Brig all the way over. And then he was assigned to the same outfit I was in Korea in a triple nickel. And he was the Jeep driver for the FO. So during this whole episode, you know, when we were shooting all night, Mertz and the FO tried to come off of the line, and they were captured. Both of them were captured in their Jeep. And so this Chinese guy took over the Jeep, and they had the FO tied up in the back end of the Jeep. And somehow Mertz got a hold of the 45 that the FO was carrying, and he shot the Chinese Jeep driver and pushed him out and jumped behind the wheel. And I guess they had a real ride off of the mountain. This Mertz guy, he was nuts.
How long did the battle last? 4 or 5 days?
That battle lasted from, no, it only lasted, this one night
Okay.
that we were there, yeah.
So then the Chinese occupied your old position?
Somehow or another, they took the position back from this salient, this area that the rock soldiers were supposed to protect. They all went off the line, and I guess we had a General Maxwell Taylor was there, and he brought the 187th in and drove them all back. And that's the way I understand anyhow. So it was quite an experience.
Did he get kind of quiet after that?
Yeah, it got kind of quiet. There was a kid that came from a town near where I lived in Iowa. His last name was Legright, and he came as a replacement 5 days before we were in this, battle. And he got captured. He was only over there 5 days and he got captured. He was shot up pretty bad. And the Chinese took him and they bandaged him up and gave him penicillin, and he was a prisoner of war, and he was repatriated at Panmunjom. And actually speaking, he was just a new recruit over there 5 days and he was captured.
Wow.
And he came back and he got out before I did.
How long had you been in Korea when this encounter started? Excuse me.
Well, this was in July, and I got to Korea in February.
Okay.
Yeah, so I was kind of hardened to what was going on. Because
Did you get an R&R after that?
I think so. I can't quite remember. I had 2 R&Rs.
Okay. Then after that encounter, shall we call it, did they move you back behind the lines to get back to Seoul? Or?
Yeah, after that encounter, they moved us. They set up a whole kind of army base with all tent city, we were all in barracks, and we had to trench it all, make trenches and put in latrines and all of that. And they found out I was pretty good at carpenter work, so they had me doing a lot of carpenter work. And one of the reasons why, because when we went back to this tent city, the battery commander said, everybody has to put wooden doors on their tents, swinging doors. And we didn't have any materials, so we had to build them out of ammo boxes. So nobody knew how to do it, so I said, I'll do it. So I built a door on a tent and I swing it out to the outside,
Mm-hmm.
And then they had inspection after all the doors were built. When they came through our tent, the battery commander said, Boeckholt, why is this tent door swinging out? You're different than everybody else. You're going to have to tear it apart and redo it. And I said, well, when they call chow hall, everybody runs like hell for the door and you swing it out. It works better than if you swing it in. Everybody piles up at the door. And he said, not a bad idea. I think everybody else will have to change their doors.
How long were you down there?
In that tent city?
Tent City, yeah.
Well, the truce was signed July 27th, and I think I was there for maybe 6 weeks.
Now, the truce was signed in 54?
Yeah.
Okay, July 54.
July 54, yeah.
Okay. So then, how much time did you spend in Korea after that?
I think
Another 16 months?
August. Not very long, maybe a month.
Okay, but you were there 2 years, weren't you? 24 months?
I wasn't there 2 months, no.
2 years?
Because I know I came back to Fort Carson, Colorado, and they signed me to an artillery outfit, and I had to go through training again.
Okay, so you still had time to go into service when you left Korea then?
Yeah, I think I still had 3 months.
Okay, so they put you in Fort Carson?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Did you come back by ship again, or did they fly you this time?
By ship.
Okay, not the same one.
Not the same one.
You get the
no.
galley again?
Pardon?
Did you get the
no,
galley?
I didn't, no.
Okay.
I decided to go out on deck and enjoy it.
So when you had left Korea, though, there was allegedly, we had a ceasefire, right?
Yes, there was a truce. We could see the lights of Panmunjom from our tent city area. Yeah.
How many encounters were you in your time there in Korea? besides that?
Well, in the Punch Bowl, we did a lot of firing in the Punch Bowl, and then we did a lot of firing in, on Outpost Harry. And in the Kumwa, we did a lot of firing there, but then they moved us to a lot of different positions where we'd be in there maybe 2 days, and we'd pull up stakes and move to another spot. So we did a lot of,
Yeah, the 105s were pretty mobile. You could
Yeah,
move around
yeah.
instead of just about any way you wanted to.
We usually didn't have any incoming rounds. We'd pull into a position and do a lot of firing, and then we'd pull out and move to another area. We could move pretty fast.
What do you remember most about Korea?
Well, I know Korea was, the mountains were quite beautiful, and I remember all the roads up through the mountains were built by our Army engineers. And somebody told me that we had to buy the property from Korea to put the roads in. We had to pay the Koreans so that we could move our equipment to defend them. That always amazed me. I know.
Did you have the Slicky Boys over there when you were there?
Pardon me?
Did you have the Slicky Boys? Remember those, the kids who used to come in and steal all our stuff?
Never
Okay.
had that, no.
You were lucky, I guess. Okay.
Well, after the war, after the truce was signed, we had houseboys that washed all of our clothes and stuff like that, and we paid them, of course. And of course, I wasn't around that long.
Yeah, a lot of them had the houseboys, and because the sad thing over there was when you got one of these Americanized houseboy, they were considered pariahs in Korea.
Yeah,
In other words, if you were of not of Korean birth, and sometimes when the troops left, they'd leave them and they couldn't go anyplace because they were outcast by the Korean people
I
themselves.
suppose, yeah.
It was too bad. Then they got to Fort Carson, okay? Then you spent 3 months there,
I spent 3 months in Fort
and then they
Carson.
said, okay, Tony, we're gonna let you go.
Yeah, they said that. They said if you re-up, we'll promote you 1 rank and give you a nice check, you know.
And you said,
And I said,
no, thank you.
No, thank you.
You were a sergeant when you were
Yeah.
discharged? So then you just came right back home to Iowa?
I did. I came back home. My father had a farm rented for me, and I also owned farm machinery of my own. And of course, my dad was a German farmer, a hard-working, big old burly guy. And of course, I was engaged to marry a girl, and everything fell apart, and I didn't want to farm because my whole personality had changed totally. Because I went in as an innocent young farm kid that probably was never out of Kasuth County, Iowa. And it was hard for my parents to understand that. And I know I was depressed, and I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I didn't want to farm. And so I started a college in Grand Rapids, Michigan, because my girlfriend was teaching school in Kalamazoo. And so I went there to this school. It was a religious college. I wasn't Catholic then, I am now, but at that point I wasn't. And so every morning when you got up, you had to go to chapel, and you had an assigned seat in the chapel. And my assigned seat in the chapel was always vacant. And I didn't live on campus, I lived off the campus, and my landlady was a Mrs. Anderson. And Dean of Men always called Mrs. Anderson to find out where I was. So one day he caught me and he says, I tried to call you last night at 10:30 and you wouldn't answer your phone, where were you? And I said, well, I was down at the corner tavern having a beer and studying. He said, Mr. Boeckholt, he says, we don't drink beer here at this college, you know. So after I was in that school for a while, I couldn't cut it. So one day I went home and I just decided, I piled all my books up in Mrs. Anderson's front yard, poured gasoline on them and lit them on fire, and got in my car and left. And as I was leaving, I waved at Mrs. Anderson. She was standing on a porch.
Well, it's tough to come back and be with
Yeah.
a bunch of 17-year-old kids that
Yeah,
haven't
right.
seen life, and you've been all over the world. And
Yeah, it was. I changed and I didn't know how to, you know, they train you to go in the Army, but they don't train you to come home.
True, very true.
Yeah. And especially if you're an innocent young farm kid that's never been anywhere and then thrown into an atmosphere like that, you react kind of different.
So you had some great experiences in the war then, really.
Oh yeah, it was a good.
Even though we didn't
experience.
call it that, we called it a police action, right?
Yeah, right. The one thing that I always thought was funny, you know, we belonged to a little country church. It was called the Ramsey Church, and that was the focal point of the German Valley community. Everybody gathered at Ramsey, and we even had a big ball field where there was a lit ball field where we played ball every night. We always played ball. But anyhow, my mother belonged to the Ladies' Aid. You've heard of Ladies' Aid. And my mother was a pretty religious lady, and all the ladies liked her, so she gave all the Ladies' Aid women my address to write me a letter. And you know, when you were in Korea, it wasn't, your address wasn't Korea, it was P.O. San Francisco.
Yeah.
So I'd get all these letters and they'd say, well, you must have nice, how are things in California, you know?
I always got a kick out of that. Yeah, you're getting it from San Francisco.
Yeah.
Well, listen, Tony, we really appreciate you spending the time with us this morning. I think you had some great experiences, and I'm sure it changed you a lot, didn't it? Like you just said, when you came home,
did.
it was a whole different world.
Yeah.
And the sad part about was, I guess in those days, we weren't as revered as the veterans today.
No.
We were kind of forgotten, but I mean, nobody really realized what was going on.
No.
And so it's been a change, and we really appreciate what people have done for us now in the service. And again, this is
Absolutely.
to commemorate what we did it today. So thank you very much. And this interview is being concluded about 11 o'clock.
Yeah. I have to show you something I got in my pocket here.
Okay.
I was at a
Sure.
wedding reception in Iowa.
Scratch that.
I don't know whether you have to put this down.
No, why not?
I was at a wedding reception in Iowa one night, and it was hot in this wedding reception, so I thought I'd sneak outside and get some fresh air. So I'm standing under a tree in the moonlight by myself. I didn't especially want to listen to all that loud music. And this guy walks up to me under the tree, and he says, "You're Tony Boeckholt, right?" And I said, "Yeah." I says, "I don't know who you are." And he says, "Well, my name is Jeff Peterson." He says, "I'm a lieutenant colonel in the Army." He said, "I heard about some of your experiences in the Army." And he said, "I wanted to talk to you." And he says, "I'm giving you an American Patriots Medal." And this is what he gave me. If you can read what it says on there, I don't know.
The Judge Advocate General's Corps, United States Army, 1775. 17, yeah. Very nice.
And he's still
I'm sorry to interrupt. They want to make sure I get all the courtrooms. I got to take a group shot with the veteran, the interviewer, and the court reporter.
Okay.
And just write